what are other things that you've been thinking about? I want to definitely look to putting you in the right frame of mind or helping you sort out some things that you might
Yeah.
be
I mean,
expecting or anticipating.
I think we definitely talked about. I think when you dream about being a dad, I think you think like,
Mm,
you're established in a career, you've got like a big house, a couple of 100,000 in savings in the bank, and you think all those things will be certain. I think for me, like I think what you have to realize when you get to this stage, and I think definitely talking to like my father and other people, is that this is the most important job in the world, but you realize you you have less qualification than someone who works the till at McDonald's. Like if you get a job at McDonald's when you're like 16, 17, they train you on the till, like or on
yeah.
the cashier, the register,
Mhm.
until you can actually do it. And you're literally just pushing a button, taking an order and taking cash, or in these days, someone's tapping a card. This is the most important job. And like, yeah, you can take all these online classes, you can ask everybody, but you are literally going to be figuring out from day one. And I think like that's just something I am having to become comfortable about because, doing it at this stage of life, sort of there's nothing I've done in my life that I haven't put a lot of thought into, whether it was leaving
Right.
the country on my birth to move here. Getting married at 36 is not a whim. Like you've clearly had previous relationships, you've walked away from things, you've just said this isn't right. So there's always been this like methodical aspect to my life, and it is literally going to go up in smoke now because I'm just going to be reacting. Like you can try and be as proactive, and you guys have said that. So it's just I think that the biggest thing is, as I've said, it's just trying to, after 46 years of just having my life be my own. Yes, I've
Mm,
shared it for the last 11 years with my wife or fiance, girlfriend, as she was in different incantations.
sure.
But it's again, that's a grown-up person who, if things aren't going right, can go off and do her own thing. I can do my own, and then we can come back and talk and figure it out. So I think that just being depended on when I've had so much independence is the biggest thing I'm having to adjust to. But you have to pair that with
Sure.
the fact that this is something you wanted to do. Like I'm not 18 and my girlfriend called me and like I'm late. Like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
we were like,
Well,
let's be late on purpose.
the
So yeah, I think like honestly, I think that when you've had the luxury of building a life for yourself, having a career, and really, being able to take 2 foreign vacations a year or take a couple, numerous city breaks, like dropping $300 on sneakers if you feel like it, like,
Mhm.
and
yeah, you
feeling like you've
definitely
really earned that, learning
uh-huh.
that you're the one who's actively going to have to give that up for a greater purpose. I think that I know some people may hear this and think that's selfish or how could you even be thinking that, but it's just a reality that the longer
It
you leave this, I think the more you are giving up.
it takes a long time to really not a long time like years, but it takes the process of doing it to really have it sink in that okay, these shoes are out, man, the shoes are out. For example, they're out. But then you're like, do we have the right stroller though? What's our diaper supply? Or, then you start seeing other things as your baby develops. We just bought the standing, like it's like a walker, but you can't move in it, but
Mhm.
she can stand in it.
Yeah.
And that was like $100. But she's always trying to stand. This is the most important toy in the history of kids. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And that's how it feels. And people will give you gifts, of course, but after 0 to 3 months, that's the size. Now you need a whole new set of clothes. So you're constantly weighing the money you're gonna spend. Is there a better way to spend it?
Right.
And
And
that hits
the
pretty early. Go ahead, Tom.
no, I was gonna say I'm just kind of piggyback on what Edward was saying, and it's very funny. Every time Edward you say something, it reminds me of me. So I'm 40 now. My wife is 4 years younger than me. When we met, definitely just like we're gonna have some fun. Like it wasn't that, and then it ended up being more. And I was, and I've said this before, but I was probably the least prepared person to be a dad ever. Like I literally never held a kid in my life. I have no nephews, nieces that are younger. I have nobody in my family that I'm really like close to that has kids. Like none of my other friends have kids. Like so, me coming into it, I had kind of the same apprehension, kind of nervousness to be like, I don't know what to do. I'm not prepared. But
Right.
I will say the one thing like people told me is like once you have all the tools inside of you to do this job,
Right.
you just have
It
to do
is.
it. And
It
you
is a
have
very instinctual.
it is. It's extremely instinctual. And like the first time I held my son, I was like, "Oh, I got this. Like I'm going to protect you." Like, and again, it's never perfect. It's you're not going to be super dead every year. Every situation is not going to play out perfectly. But at the end of the day, as long as that child has a safe space to grow up and learn, food, food, clothing, a place to sleep, you're doing a great job. And me and Aaron have talked about this before. Like, I think for me, being older helped me actually feel like I was better prepared mentally because again, I was out the run. Aaron's known me for 20 something years. Like, we met in college. Like I've been always, running, moving. And now it's like, okay, now I have to slow down. And COVID actually was a benefit to me because it made me slow down. Like there was no FOMO. Like I wasn't missing nothing. The world
Right.
stopped. Like, no, let's have a kid. So it actually worked out perfectly. But I understand exactly what you're going through with some of the apprehensions and not knowing exactly what's next, but fully know that it, just I can tell by your mindset, like your mannerisms, your everything you like, you're gonna be ready the second your son comes
Yeah.
out, you're like, I got this, and just
Well,
Definitely.
be
yeah,
very
no,
confident in that.
Go ahead.
I appreciate you saying that, Tony. I just think like for me, I don't know how you guys felt. Like, I think the other thing is just like, I think culturally, I grew up in South London,
Mm-hmm.
but there were a lot of immigrants there,
Hmm.
and particularly from Ghana. So I had my community intact, like
Mm-hmm.
transplanted. So it was surrounded. And like I live out here and I love Los Angeles, but my community isn't here. There's not like a lot of Ghanaians. So like my
Totally.
child learned their native tongue like I did just by being around it. So there's things like that now, like, I realize that, oh, this is different. Like, how am I going to make sure he has this connection that I did that was so important and was such a source of strength to overcome adversity or, negative things that are said about you as you're growing up as like a young, black man. My wife, her ancestry is not sort of is Mexican and Portuguese, and
Mm-hmm.
that's definitely more intact here. You know, he has his community here, so I think that that's great. So these are the kind of things I weigh up now as I'm about to become a father. Like that's very important to me that my child know his ancestry, know his culture, as well as balance that out with being African American in America. Like that's
Yeah.
another part I'm having to understand, which is why like it was very important. Like I chose one of my closest friends out here who's African American to be his godfather, because like that for me is, something that I'm gonna need to lean on, have some help with, because I came here at 28 with a different mindset, even though I've lived here for nearly 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's different than being born in it. And so it's just things like that. I mean, for me, the crying, the diaper changing, the colic, I think that these are things that, like you say, we can figure out. And I appreciate what
Well,
you say, Tony.
those are 100% like the immediate day-to-day things that'll kind of
Right.
drive you crazy. These long-term things, I think, are questions for our generation because we're all so scattered. I grew up in Indiana. I got a lot of family in the Baltimore, D.C. area, but
Right.
nobody's west of the Mississippi. You know, I'm very lucky because my my fiance is from L.A., so her family is close, but there's always a but. Like her family is a lot older. Like we're by far the youngest. Like the next oldest cousin is 60. You know, so even there, we're wondering like, okay, how many? Not to be dark, but how many funerals is this kid gonna go to
Yeah,
before
that's
they're
no, that's
20?
very
You
true.
know,
Yeah, no, it's true.
grandparents are in their late 70s. Like everybody's old. My mom is in their 70s. So, and when people are older, it's also like their ability to help is less. There's less energy. There's less of that maybe we grew up with, where grandparents were younger parents. Everybody was around and active. Everybody's kind of around and falling asleep like the baby. So it's a big adjustment, and I think Tony and I have talked a lot about like, is this part of our community here? Even though me and Tony don't live close, But you and I live pretty close. And
Yeah.
we had a guest Sullivan on a few weeks ago. He also lives in LA. He's pretty close. And there's almost like a new, not quite a baby boom, but of people 35 to 45 that are having kids that I've noticed in my friend groups.
I
So
don't- I
they
think
have
it's
to like,
inevitable
yeah,
because I just think, again, okay, so you and I have grown up very differently, or the three of us on this podcast have grown up very differently than a generation before us, or even two generations. Like
Yeah.
two generations, if you made it through high school, great, but go to the plant or go get a job, work, get married, have kids.
Yep.
Then you
right.
kind of go through, like, I know my dad and my mom were the first people in the family, or one of the first people in the family to go to higher education. Like
Mm-hmm.
my dad traveled to London to study accountancy. My mother traveled to England to become a midwife. They then got to a certain level and said, you have to go to university. I think like the longer and the more you kind of explore the world, it delays things. And that goes for women too. Like the majority of us don't really kind of hit our professional strides or careers till we're like in our early to mid 30s. And that takes a lot of
Right.
grinding. And if you want to do the things that we do, you kind of do delay having kids. And so you can get, and I think that particularly with women wanting to be in the workplace, and I want to say I am in support of this, this is not a criticism. It's hard to compete with men who are doing 12, 16 hours a day. And then you be told with this biological clock ticking, okay, you have to stop this race that you're in and
Yeah.
fill this
And
responsibility.
have a kid.
And
Yeah.
there are things now that have changed that. But also I didn't think it was fair for my wife at 31, 32 when we were trying to start a business to be like, okay, we have to halt this dream right now to deal with this. But the other thing you don't understand is the longer you wait, it's going to be harder.
Yeah.
Like we had nearly, we were exploring all avenues, and we were getting ready to have the adoption question conversation too, just
Mm-hmm.
because, we didn't know if this was going to happen. And it did happen. And we're incredibly grateful and we're so happy to be here. But to your point, Aaron, like, yeah, everybody's older. Like, I'm glad you're going through this at this same time. Like I've got a DP friend, cinematographer friend who's just doing it too. So there's a group, a collective that will be together. But I have guilt. Like, I need to make it to 90 so that
Mhm.
I can see my
Yeah.
son reach
How old am
my
I? Yeah.
age and not feel like I left him like in his 20s to figure out the world when he needed his dad probably the most. Like, I feel so bad about that. I feel
Yeah.
bad that my mom and dad are not going to they're already 6,000 miles away. They're not going to have the time with this kid that they should have. And it's so guilt. Like, there's a lot of guilt behind that. Like, I
Mhm.
feel so bad. I mean, this is a blessing and it's a joy, but yeah, there is a part of me that's just like, I can't address it and I don't want to. So I put it to the back of my mind, but it's definitely there. Like, now I'm taking supplements and vitamins, working out 4 times a week, and taking my old man medicals seriously every year because I have to do everything I can now so I can see my kid make 45.
Yeah.
That's so crazy you said, because I literally just said that yesterday. Is like, so I'm 40, I'll be 41 May 1st. And I was like, I have to live to 80 to, like, okay, make sure that you're good before I go. And that's so crazy because, and we're also planning on just decided yesterday, we're going to do a plan on another kid in probably September, October of this year. So man, I got to make it to 85 now to make sure like,
We've been
so
talking
it, so
about
it,
that too, about your journey with potentially having another kid
yeah.
too.
So
So
we decided yesterday.
congratulations
Yeah.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Woo. But yeah,
on
but again,
beginning the attempt. Yeah.
yeah. So like you, I'm taking men's one a days. I go to the gym 4 or 5 days a week, and I'm in there for an hour. Like I'm a big snack monster. Like I eat candy. Like I could eat licorice for the rest of my life if they told me I wasn't
Well,
gonna die. Like gotta
here's
stop that. So like you have to kind of think about the long term. Like I'm always thinking like, okay, what is Tony in 10 years or Legend in 10 years? That's my son's name. In 10 years, gonna think about me if I'm gone or sick.
Right. Right.
well
Yep.
here's a
I
question
thought about that yesterday. That's
here's a
crazy.
question that also brings up to me. Like the way we were raised, where it was like go out and have these experiences. Does that now change for how we raise our kids? Did the
Oh,
world
No.
that's a
change so
really
much that we're like, you need to like, okay, you're fourth grade, like when does the coding classes start? So you can get a job a little earlier than I did. You
Listen,
know what I
I
mean?
hate to be honest, like Aaron, like I have like nieces and nephews who like come to me for guidance, and I've said to them, look, listen, if you want to do arts, you know, you want to be an actress, or you want to do what, you know, we did. I said, look, that's fine, but this is like, you know, by the time my kid is 18, college may be like 500 grand a semester. You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
I don't know what USC is going to cost at that point. And so, like, this is now a decision. Like, if you're going to do something and you're going to get
Hey,
this much debt, do it for something where the future is moving. Now, if you decide I this is degree and I don't want to do this, and you know, being sort of like, you know, as much as people want to speak negatively about sort of like, I'll say the Black, or, you know, the African American male experience in this country, there's more of us in the middle class than there's ever been.
Yeah,
That's
sure.
sure.
progress, whether people want to acknowledge it. Like, you know, and we hopefully will have some generational wealth to pass on to our children, or
Mhm.
put them in position that we've known our other counterparts have always had, where, you know, mom and dad can provide some kind of like financial platform for me to either start a business or pursue something. So you're
Right.
right, Aaron, like we're not going to be like, you know, our parents were like, you got to go out there and you just got to grind and you got to do this and don't take no for a no. Like, our kids are probably going to have options that we had that our parents didn't have, and you know, we won't even be able. But you're right, like there is a responsibility now. Like, I don't know if I can have my kid get 150 grand in debt to go to
Well,
college, take pottery and anthropology, and
yeah,
then,
be
you know,
be
figure it out.
undeclared for two semesters. Like undeclared. No, well, like a quick story. Like my nephew, who's 12 or 13, he'll be 13 this year. He said since he was a kid, he wanted to be a chef. It's one of those,
Hmm.
you ask a 4-year-old, what do you want to be? And he was like, a chef. You ask him 4 years later, he's like, I want to be a chef. You ask him now, he's like, I want to be a chef. Like, it's ingrained in him.
Right.
So I told my mom, grandma, I was like, is he cooking dinner for y'all yet? Because I was watching Chef Junior, you know, Master Chef Junior, and these kids are whipping up masterpieces. And they're like, well, he's kind of good at this and he knows how to do some things. I was like, get that kid some cook, like, get him working. Like,
Hmm.
what kind of chef is he going to be? Let's figure that out so he can, because he can always make money and that's a great occupation, you know?
Yeah.
Even if he decides
And
to do something later, he can
Aaron,
always have that, you know?
Aaron, you always talk about for years, even before this, we talk about specialization. And I think that's going to be the big thing that our kids' generation is going to really have to lean in on is special. If you want to be a chef, you better be the best chef. You better go to French culinary school and specialize in making good
Yeah.
yogurt or whatever
Like
it is, or
your pastry
be an
chef,
AI
you do meat.
coding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Whatever it
yeah,
is.
yeah. I think that's gonna be the difference is if you're gonna go to school, like I said, to go in whatever amount of $100,000 of debt, you want to make sure that you come out with a skill that is not just general studies, which we were told, hey, just go to school as long as you have a degree, we can teach you
Yeah.
something.
That
Now
degree
you
means
come
something.
out
It
being a
didn't.
doctor, come out being the number one coding expert in AI, advanced telemetry, whatever it is.
Generative. Yeah.
Yeah,
Preach,
and
Tony.
that's the only reason you need to go to school is if you need a specialization like in a very specific skill. Other than that, there's a lot of world experience you can get. I mean, you guys are both in film industry. My younger brother Aaron knows. Like my younger brother just walked on a film set one day, and now he does production. Because he just walked on a film set. Like he failed out of 2 or 3 different colleges, and now he just does film, and it's like he just got a lot of real world experience. So you don't necessarily have to go to school to follow your passion. You just have to be able to specialize in whatever it is that you
Yeah.
want to do.
Yeah,
You
I
have to
mean,
be able to learn and navigate, you know?
Exactly.
I think the thing, and Aaron, you've raised like a really salient point with this question is, I think we're entering fatherhood in a time where the job market and the career field is just, I don't know, it's rapidly changing. I don't, I think
Hmm.
the idea that you could just go to like even humanities, like sadly, we don't reward people like teachers.
Nope.
We don't, things like, music teachers. Like you could be
Right.
a solid middle class person teaching people piano, and you could make great money being a session musician, but technology has and automation has, removed that. So there's this shrinking job field that automation is taking a lot of.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I feel like being a chef is always going to be a great profession, and
Yep.
people are always going to want to sample food. So, I mean, I think like things like that are great, but I do think Aaron, to your point, like the idea of just loving your child and telling them to pursue their dreams, like if their dream is not a realistic one and you don't have the money to supplement their life, then their life is going to be hard. And yeah, you do have to now tell your kid, like, make sure you're going to get 100 grand in debt for the right career. Don't
Yeah.
do it on a whim. Or it might be better to, like, I got to be honest, Aaron, like it might be better if you want to do what we did. Like, is that 100 grand going to a university for 4 years and then having to come out and find another 100 grand to make your feature? Is that the best thing? Now, if my wife and I are in a position where we can do that and we believe in our child, I'll absolutely do that.
100%. Yeah.
I won't. But I do think, you have to be cognizant of how you send your child out into the world, because a lot of the decisions that, I made, and I'm sure that you guys made, like we're comfortable with them, and, we live a certain lifestyle, but there's a price to be paid. Like, my student loan payment is a house note. Like
Mhm.
every month it's a house note, and I don't regret it. I'm happy, but and going to USC Film has, not just for the instruction I got there, but the connections I've made, it's paid for itself. But yeah, we are entering this phase, and I feel like it happened
I
like
mean,
post World War II. There was this boom where, your
of course.
grandparents' generation, these countries industrialized, like you could make good money. Then the 80s come, America and Great Britain, they move from being like a manufacturing power to like service industries. So now
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
do need to go to university if you want to work in banking, you want to be a lawyer, you want to do things that make good
Right.
money. We're now entering this other phase where the AI automation phase, where, to your point, Aaron, you got to know how to code because you got to be in charge of that, or you got to know how to utilize these tools, or you need to be able to have 3 or 4 revenue stream generating
Yeah.
opportunities.
You
You
got to
got
have
real estate.
multiple.
Yeah,
Because
you've got to be. So I mean, like, I think that's the thing. And the thing is, sadly, the information is always passed down to gentlemen like us last, or if we
Yeah.
aren't clever enough or shrewd enough to make sure we're in the room when it's being
yeah.
like things that weren't like, my kid is going to start trading from 18.
Right.
Mhm.
I'm going to force that
Like
because I
here's
didn't do
money,
that.
get into the market.
But
Better
put
be
it in the
talking
market.
about financial stuff all the time. And like the thing is, you I think learning is going to be the biggest skill in the future. You're going to have to be able to learn quickly and adapt to new industries. So like you have a cumulative life. Like so the baby boomer, that whole generation coming up in the 60s and 70s, this idea that you come out of school, you get one career, and you work that for 40, 50 years, that's a historical anomaly.
Yeah.
Anytime before, people just kind of got in where they fit in, and as they aged, they got more skills, so they got a different job, or their skills and physical ability deteriorated, so they got a different job. We're kind of entering back into what is more natural for humans, where if you're out in the world and you're learning and you build up some skills, you'll find a job, and then 10 years later, you have to get a different job. So when you look at writers, for instance, that are like, I was a lawyer, now I write on all these procedural law shows, that's a more realistic kind of
Mhm.
career flow for our industry specifically that people have to look at or feel like, well, when I was a kid, I did this and this led to this led to that. Then I went to school. It's kind of like all has to add up together. And there's no point, there's very few time periods where you can just be exploratory, I think, in the future.
I mean, I think the thing is, with the rising costs of living, like even if you make 6 figures, I can see a world where that's enough to cover your bases. And yeah, you
Right.
can still go out for dinner. But the truth of the matter is, Aaron, to piggyback off what you said, like we are going to have to teach our children to be as proactive as anybody else. Because the truth is, you do need to start investing early. Like they need
Yeah.
these Robinhood accounts, or, the Acorn account, and just
Yeah.
learn. Even if they make mistakes, they need to learn. And we are entering a phase where if you make, I was having a discussion with a friend the other day, and we were talking about like, what is middle class? Like, where does it begin? And in the United States, apparently, if you make somewhere between 65 to 150,000, you are middle class. If you make more than that, you are upper middle class. And Aaron could speak to this. Being upper middle class even if you're upper middle class in this city, you don't feel it. It's
Oh
For
yeah.
it's
sure.
very regardless of the rest of the country, you just don't feel it. And so the thing I think that we have to really, really get on our children is you've got to generate other streams of income.
Mhm.
And particularly if you want to have a career with something you pursue, that thing may be a passion. And yes, it may make you enough to live on, but is it going to make you enough to thrive?
And on top of that, what kind of lifestyle do you want to live? Like you said, you may just be making just enough to get by. Is that a lifestyle that, some people want less or want whatever? We have to look at the prices of apartments and the prices of things. And it's like, okay, well, you're not going to have a kid until you're 40 either, or you're not going to, you're going to have to like decide.
Well, and
Everybody
then
has
you
to continue to
said,
decide what kind of life you want. Cause like I said, we moved in with my fiance's parents, and it's just a great financial decision. And we might
yeah,
have wanted a different life in a different way, but this is what's best for us now. And a lot of what decisions have to be made are what is best, what's best. That's kind of the key
Yeah.
phrase.
and now even making $100,000, like you had said, or 150 isn't even enough to get a house. Like, because you think
To get a
about like
house.
the historical like trajectory of life. You go to college, get a good job, buy a house, have a family. You can't buy it. Like the house is taken out now because the cost of living is too high. Like I was reading something saying that in the 50 top metropolitan areas in the US, it's way cheaper to rent than it is to buy. And then I just read after that Blackstone, which is a big conglomerate that buys
Buys
everything,
everything.
just bought Air Communities, which is they own like hundreds of thousands of units for rentals. So another company just bought up all the rentals as well. So all they're doing is literally just pricing everybody out of most markets. So
Didn't we
you
just
need to
find
be
out that
making.
we were under the same management company at my old apartment?
Oh yeah,
Great
Grace, yeah,
Star.
Grace, yeah,
Yeah,
Grace, yeah.
Great
And they
Star
just
owned.
bought the place I live
I'm
in.
in
I'm
LA.
in
He's
San
in San
Diego.
Diego.
Yeah,
Like,
yep. So and again, but so they've priced. So after 2008, they bought up all the houses. They priced everybody out the market. Then COVID hit. Everybody who had cash could just come in and buy out the market. Now everybody can only rent. Now they're coming in and buying up all the rentals. So you need to have a dual income house with at least 150, 200,000, even to get a ticket to play the game, to buy a house, to
like a
actually
new
have some
thing.
type
Yeah.
type of you know
Oh
wealth
man.
to pass on. Because again, if you're not in the stock game, if you're not in any kind of real estate game, you can't, there's nothing to pass on. Like you're passing on
No.
cash,
And
which
and to
is nothing. Yeah.
to your point, Tony, like, yeah, I mean, it's difficult. And as a, to tie it back to the theme of the show, like, 40 and being a black dad, like, I can't just pick up and go to some rural community where it's more affordable and I can work remotely and
Right.
get a home because, like, I'll just be honest, and this is not being disparaging to anyone. It's very important that my child be in a multicultural environment, or at
Yeah.
least see
For sure.
other, like, even to the point of choosing our pediatrician, which has been very specific. I said to my wife, and this is, we interviewed everybody. Like, we've interviewed people who are white, people who are, Asian. But I said to my wife, like, I do want to definitely interview African American and Hispanic American pediatricians, because when I was growing up in England, I was so fortunate that my general practitioner was a gentleman called Dr. Hayfron Benjamin. And he was such a source of pride because he was a Ghanaian immigrant who had become a doctor. And he looked after me from infancy till I was about 24.
Oh
And
wow.
anytime somebody would say something negative about, sort of being like an Afro-Caribbean man in Great Britain, or, not being able to
Yeah.
achieve, or things like that, I could point to people like my father and people like Dr. Benjamin, who were great source, even subconsciously were great sources of strength for me. So
Yeah.
again, to tie back to what you're saying, like, yeah, I could, move to some community where I can get a 2,500 square foot home for like 150, 200 grand. But am I surrounded by the right elements that make sure that my child has a three-dimensional view of the world, that he can appreciate and, judge people on the content of the character and not the color of the skin, but have enough tools and arrows in his quill to defend himself when he's hearing all these negative messages about what it is to be a black man, not just in America, but anywhere in the world. And that's important to me. I think that these are things that you have to factor in when you decide where you want to live. And a lot of times that's in major metropolitan areas. Like,
Yeah.
okay, you're from Indiana, but I guess buying a house in Indianapolis is going to be way more expensive than buying it in one of the more rural areas, you know?
For sure.
So relative to where you are, that's always the thing. Like, you know, I would love
Yeah.
to be able to gate crash into Baldwin Hills or Lamar Park, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it's not a reality for me. It's not.
No.
And despite my level of education and what I'm able to achieve, like it's tapped out. So you are right. Like you have to figure these things out. And is it a case of now, is my future living in Los Angeles where I can control what my environment is, what my child's community will be, and then buying property in places where I'm not going to live, but it's affordable and renting those out and becoming a landlord and passing that on to my child, as opposed to the traditional means, which was you bought a home, you put all this equity and money into it, and then you left it to your kids.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, that's what I'm trying to figure out right now. Like we would like to buy a home in the next 3 years. But I mean, the market keeps, every time you think you know what your deposit needs to be and you're working towards that, the market just keeps on
Change.
moving. Like
Oh yeah.
we talked
It's
about there
crazy.
being a correction after COVID or when the interest rates went up. It just doesn't,
No.
because we live in a world now where foreign nationals still want to put money in the Los Angeles housing market because it's golden. And so that's something that our grandparents and our parents didn't deal with.
Yeah.
So, you know, we now live in this global community, which is, you know, adversely affects us too. So these are all things you kind of have to factor in, you know, as being a dad, whilst you're learning them yourself, when, you know, you didn't necessarily weren't given those skills because your parents weren't in possession of them.
Right.
Exactly.
And like you said, a lot of things are new, AI, and even if you do choose to live in a rural area, a lot of these things still affect you. So we're gonna wrap it up. This was a great discussion. We'll definitely have to
Yeah.
get more into some of it, but we'll let you have your baby, get adjusted
We'll bring
before
you
we
back
call you
after
back.
after
Yeah.
about 2
Well,
months.
I hope I hope it was meaningful. If there's anything you want to ask me and just, you know, have me give you straight answer, I'm happy to do that too.
No, we're good today. We'll have you back, or and then you and I will be texting, of course, and
Oh, I'd love to. But you know, it's a
definitely.
pleasure to meet you. And I got to be honest, like, thank you for doing this. This is such a valuable resource. You know, and I think that it is important. There's like unique things that we do confront as fathers, and I know we haven't gotten to some of the more nefarious sort of things that we have to traverse as men growing up, but I really appreciate this. It's like a really welcoming and supportive and warm space, and it feels good to be able to talk about these things openly, you
Yeah,
know, with people who are
yeah,
kind of going through this.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's one
definitely.
thing we kind of saw is like there's not too many spaces for specifically black men and that are fathers or about to be fathers to come and talk about it. Because in our society, we don't talk about, you know, birthing and being insecure and things like that. So that's what we're trying to create is just a space where people can, have a community where you just feel comfortable, like, in the comments or just, talking about things you're going through because nobody's going through anything by themselves. Like everything is very much
Yeah,
cyclical.
just
Being a father, being a parent, all parents are going through those same things. And
yeah,
I think that's the biggest thing we want to let people know.
I
yeah,
think one of the toughest things that we as a generation are going to have to deal with is I think we might be the first generation, and I think we can say this as a community. We've never allowed to be vulnerable,
Yep.
because vulnerability is a sign of weakness. And when you are so busy trying to keep the world out or project this strength, like you're not beating me, like to just be able, you know, it's my dad. I never see my dad cry or show any vulnerability or even, you know, um, culpability to some
hmm
degree. But it's
hmm
been interesting talking to him and just being like, "Hey, were you this nervous?" And him saying, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know what I was doing, and you were on your way, but you figure it out." I mean, that was tremendous for me just to hear that, because this is a person you put on this pedestal. I mean, you learn as you go through life, your parents are fallible, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the hardest lessons you learn. I think I had to learn that when I was in my teens, like, oh, they're just two
People.
kids who fell in love and were trying to figure it out, and you know, they were getting divorced and they weren't perfect. And I think that because we've been taught like you got to be strong, you know, you can't be weak, don't be soft, all this stuff, like what you guys are doing is incredibly important.
Like,
We enjoy
subscribe,
doing
and
it. We
follow.
need more guests like you. We need more guests like you. Like